Hi everyone, this is Stan Muller. I am the senior producer on Crash Course. I work on the humanities side, making things like Crash Course World History, U.S. History, World History 2, Crash Course Economics, World Mythology, Literature, basically a lot of stuff that's not science. I also do a lot of editing on the show. So today we are going to be talking about how we edit a crash course. The first thing we're going to talk about is color grading in the Lumetri color correction panel. The first thing we do is bring in our footage. We'll get back to how we set up our projects and everything here in a minute, but let's talk about color to begin with. I'm going to start in the color workspace up here. You can also set that up here through the window drop down. So first things first, let's grab a piece of footage. These are a little short, so those are probably some false starts at the beginning. So we're going to start here. I will drop this in and create a sequence, and here we go. We've got our footage. There's Mike wearing his water wings, nice orange color popping off the background. But we can improve the look of this. You can see how one of the main problems we have with this show is how the background is sort of the same color as the skin tone. Not a great set design on my part. So I think the thing to do is just run through what all these different panels do. You can start with a LUT, a lookup table. These are, at this point in the basic correction, these look to be designed for specific cameras and video codecs that you may have shot with. None of these are our camera, so they're not going to be very useful for us. So we're going to start at none and do all this manually because, you know, you're here to learn about the tool, right? Okay, so the first thing to fix here is the white balance. Everything is a little yellow here. So we fix this with the white balance section. We'll try out the selector, but also we'll look at the manual tools of changing the color temperature, making it cooler or warmer by sliding this slider. And we can change the tint, add in some of the greens or some of the reds and magenta to make Mike look like a human being here. And we did an okay job of shooting it, so I don't think we'll have to do a lot. Let's try the automatic tool and see how that goes. We will take our color dropper, and I know these are white in real life, the set pieces here. So if we sample one of those, that made it pretty cool, I think. This is pretty bluish, and by pretty cool, I mean too cool. Let's undo that and take a look at this manually. We'll slide this toward cool, and it initially went to 23 there, which I think is too much, but negative 15 is even too much. We'll set these manually. Minus 10. Actually, yeah, I'm just going to go with like a minus 3 here. And then, let's see, sort of slide it around, play with it. A lot of this color correction stuff is based on your taste, right? I mean, it's the way you want it to look. And we're just going to get this to something I think looks good. What you think looks good might be different. But in any case, these are the tools that can get you to the look that you want. It's also a little bright here, I think. It just barely, so minus 0.2 on the exposure. And yeah. Yeah, I kind of like that a little better. So one nice thing we can do here, I like to keep the effect controls open here also. Whoops, blend mode, oh boy. Even though they are not easy to use over here, it's all more like a standard effect. The color panel is very nice, very user-friendly. But over here, I just like to be able to turn off what we've done there with the FX button. And we can get a look at our original footage and come back to it. And that makes me think the exposure was fine. So next, but the exposure, if you've shot it too bright or too dark, you can shift it, and it does a pretty believable job of fixing the exposure in the same way it would look if you had changed this in camera, which is really nice. Next, we're going to look at the contrast. The contrast, we usually want to bring that up a little bit, or at least I do, the way I like these to look. You don't want to get out of control here, but I think about 15 there looks pretty good. Yeah, just bumps it up a little bit, brings out the shadows and the highlights a little bit. We may want to, if you want to control those things individually, which may be the way to go. I don't usually mess with the contrast. Let's take the highlights up just a hair and bring out our shadows. So the highlights, obviously that's going to bring out the bright sections of the video. You can turn those up or turn them down. We're going to bring them up a little bit to make it look more lively. About an 18. And then the whites and blacks is going to have a similar effect. You're going to bump up all the white aspects of the image, and you can get out of control and make it look all overexposed. We're going to leave that alone. Blacks, I do like to bring the slider down to -10 or so, and that really makes it look rich to me. It makes it look really great. Gives it a lot of depth and helps pop Mike off the background a little bit there, especially when he's wearing a dark shirt like this. So that is starting to look pretty good to me. For the basic correction, let's take a look at our original again. Yeah, it didn't do a whole lot to begin with there. The last thing we're going to do here in the basic correction is saturation. We're going to bring out the overall saturation of the colors a little bit. About 110 is what I usually like to do, and that just amps up his skin tones a little bit, and it made him a little pink. So in the tint, we can adjust the overall reds, take a little bit of that out, and that starts to get there, but we will actually address that in just a second. So we're done with the basic correction panel. We've gotten a quick look at some of these things. You know, as I continue to look at it, maybe we want it a little warmer. Let's say -10. Okay, we're getting there. It's starting to look like a human being here and starting to look kind of cool. So we'll move on from the basic correction panel to the creative panel. As I said, we've got these lookup tables here. Again, all kinds of cool film stocks and everything. You can really add some pretty extreme looks, but also some really cool looks. I really like the simulations of a lot of this film stock, and there are neat looks in here. I mean, you can just try them out, see which ones you like. Oh, you can even flip through them here, get kind of a preview. Yeah, that's cool. Anyway, so the intensity I usually do not fool with. I feel like we shoot a pretty good image in camera, and we need pretty basic adjustments here. Faded film is kind of cool. It gives you a sort of film look. It's like your old grandparents' 8mm movies or something. Not of a lot of use here, but it is kind of a neat thing, and it really works very well. Sharpen is a tool we are going to use today. Usually I like to bring up the sharpness a little bit here and really make the talent pop. I usually go with about a 20 on the sharpening. Nothing huge, but it sort of brings out all the edges and really makes the light in his eyes pop. The vibrance we do not usually mess with here. Leave it as it is. The saturation, we adjust it up in basic. So you have another opportunity to saturate here, but we are not going to do so. Okay, and then this is kind of cool. At this point, we had the tint up in the basic correction. You'll remember we could adjust the overall tint of the video. Here, we get a little finer control. We can adjust the tint in the shadows, and we can adjust the tint in the highlights. So I mentioned earlier, I felt like Mike's hands were getting a little pink, so we can, those will usually be in the highlights, so we can drag the tint of those down into the green just a little bit, and you can see his skin tone start to change there. I'll bring it back, and yeah, he looks a little seasick. So just a touch of change there, and it's starting to look pretty good, I think. Yeah, beautiful. And then if we wanted to, we could cool the shadows a little bit. I don't love it. Okay, so we're going to leave the shadows alone and move on to the curves. Now, there's a lot of cool stuff you can do in here. We usually do not mess with it. For example, the pinkness issue that I was talking about earlier, we could use the curves to take a little bit of the red out or put it back in. And you can do that across the range and create sort of a curve here, but we're not going to do that. A lot of people like the S curve in the curves, where you bring the blacks down, bring the highlights up a little bit, and give this a gentle curve, and it gives it this look that a lot of people like, but I think we get pretty close to that with the sliders in basic correction. The hue saturation curves, also really cool. You can select a color range by clicking on these dots, and you'll get points where you can manipulate the saturation, the hue saturation. So if we want more reds, we could amp up those reds, and you can see his hands starting to go pink there and his face starting to go pink. You can also bring those down a little bit and make him look like a vampire, which is not a great look, I don't think. And if we felt like there were too many blues in there, we could take some of those out, and that would sort of make him yellow. You have a lot of cool controls here that don't really get called for a lot in what we do, but can really give you some fine control over the color balance in these videos. The color wheels are kind of useful. You can sort of take your highlights, shadows, and midtones and do a big basic adjustment on those. Darken the shadows a little bit. They're already pretty dark though, so we're going to leave those as is. And much like these two color wheels we saw before, this gives you like another layer of fine control. Let's actually bring those midtones down just a hair. And that looks pretty good to me. Secondary color correction, again, something we don't use a lot on Crash Course, but there's a lot of really neat tools in here. One of the cool things you can do with a secondary color correction is do some really dramatic color effects with the key section. Just as a quick example, one of the things you can do, if we take this plus sign eyedropper, we can, let's say, select this orange, and you tap it again and get another sample. So you can see the orange is variable there along that highlight. Just grab a few different samples of that orange, and it'll create this color range. And then if you click in this color gray box, okay, we haven't got a whole lot of it yet. So let's just keep adding colors here until we have a good range of oranges. So we're adding each one, and you can see it change here. Okay, not terrible, but we can do better as usual. But I would also prefer this go fast because this is not actually part of the job. Okay, that's pretty decent. Not great, but anyway, you then have the opportunity to, let's blur that a little bit. Sort of take off some of those rough edges. You can then change just that color within the video. So we can shift the color temperature of those really, or cool them off without changing everything else in the video. We're just, yeah, we can even change the color of these in the tint. Up the contrast, sharpen them, saturate them, just really bring them over the top. And you could even change their color to some degree. So a lot of really cool stuff you can do in here, but none of it all that practical for our purposes here today. So let's just turn off that secondary since we've messed with it. And the last thing we've got here is a vignette, which is really cool and useful for focusing the viewer's attention. And basically it just brings in a oval of transparent fading black to sort of transparent fading. It brings in an oval of transparent black to, oh boy, brings in an oval of sort of black to focus the viewer's attention on what's in the center of the screen. And you can change how big an oval that is. You can change whether it is a circle, more of a square vignette, which is kind of cool. Let's bring it in here so you can see those shapes. Right, so the roundness can be an oval, can be all the way to a circle to really highlight something. It can be, give it sort of a weird old-timey film frame look there, which is kind of cool. We'll bring that back to 0, and you can feather it to make the gradient a little more dramatic. Yeah, there it is, completely unfeathered. It's just an oval. But you want that gradient so it's a nice smooth look and doesn't distract the viewer by there being a big circle on screen. So that's the vignette. We're not going to use that. I do use vignettes in Crash Course, but that we do a little differently because of the way we shoot this footage. But for now, that is the basics of Lumetri. The color panel that they've added in Creative Cloud is super useful, and we no longer really send our footage out to any other programs to do our correction and grading because this works so well. Okay, so once we've got the look where we like it, let's take one more look at the original, and oh yeah, oh man, yeah, I like it. So our camera takes 5-minute clips. Basically, we film the whole thing continuously, so we end up with a bunch of different videos. So now I need to apply this effect to all of those. What I'm gonna do is create a preset. So there's the source monitor, here's effect controls, nothing there until I click on that video, and then you can see where we added this Lumetri color. So this, I'm going to create a preset. Let's call it Crash Course Myth 16 color. And that will allow us to then apply the same effect to all of our clips, because this is number 41, so number 42, there it is. The color has not been adjusted here yet. So when we later look at the two of them together, there's that big shift in color, which we can't have, but we've already did all the work. All we have to do is find our effects library, and I just search for CC Myth. There it is. There's the number 16 color, and we just drop it on, and we've got continuous consistent color, which we can then take to editing the rest of the video. So yeah, there you have it. Okay, so now that we've figured out our color correction situation, we're going to go back in time a little bit here and start the project, basically. We are working on Crash Course Mythology episode 16 today, Floods in the Ancient Near East. So first thing we're going to do is get into Premiere and create a new project. We're going to work on the desktop today because it's easier. So I've created a folder here called Crash Course Mythology, blah, blah, blah. One of the reasons that I number these the way they're numbered is I number it and title it, basically, so that not only am I looking at these episodes by number, but also I can see what it's about at a glance. Once we've made 50 of these and they're all sitting in a folder together, it's not that easy to remember what number 16 was, so it's better if I have the content there. So I've created a Premiere folder where we will keep our project files and etc. This footage folder has our footage, and then we have assets that carry through from episode to episode, like our sound, our end screens, etc. We'll use those as well. So that is all already there in this folder, but we're going to store the project folder in a Premiere folder to keep all that separate from everything else. So we will title the episode the same as Oh boy, can't type. We're going to title the episode the same as that folder. Again, just to keep everything under control. So this is our project. We're in the editing workspace because we're about to edit this thing. First things first, let's bring in our footage. We'll double click here in the project window and navigate to that footage folder you saw earlier. And let's just import the whole thing. It's got the footage in there. It's got the audio in there. We will just import the whole folder and we will get an error message, file import failure. These are some of the files that come along with the audio. We don't need them. Doesn't matter. It won't import them. We just want that wave. So here's our footage. We shoot in 4K, but we export in 1080, which will make things a little funny here, but it gives us a couple advantages as well. What we do, this clip is 23 seconds, so it's probably just... yeah, Mike messing around, blowing up his water wings, so we won't use this. This one's just a couple seconds more silliness, and that one's 13. So we're still not quite ready. Just chit-chatting. And you can hear in the audio for these, you hear my booming voice. Hey, there's the slate. So this is the clip that starts us off. So we shoot in one continuous shot. Mike just stands in the middle. We shoot it with him there. Later, we cover our jump cuts by kind of reframing. Because we'll be exporting this at 1080p, we have a huge video to work with this 4K. So we can easily scale it down, move it around to make it look as if we're moving the camera, but we are not. It is a fraud. I will show you how we do that here briefly. But first things first, let's get our audio synced with our video. Because if you listen... oh, this is a great... my voice is booming. This is the camera mic. And that is not useful to us. We want the stuff... okay, so here's the slate. What we're going to do is... drop a marker right on that click of the slate. And that gives us a visual and audio reference. We can hear it and see it. There it is. So, we've marked that. Now we will drag this clip down into the timeline window where it will create a sequence from the file. And that sequence will have the same settings as the original file. So this is a 4K sequence. You can see the image fills up our whole program monitor. Speaking of back in time, over here we have the source monitor where we see whichever clip we have selected from our project window. And here we have the program monitor, which shows us the video from our timeline. So we'll preview things in the source and then move them into the timeline and they'll become visible in the program monitor. Because we shoot these all continuously, we're shooting for 30 minutes, 40 minutes at a time to record the whole episode. And the camera breaks these up into files that are 5 or 6 minutes long. We started with 41. That's where our slate is. We've got a bunch of video files that should seamlessly join together because the camera doesn't stop or anything. It just makes a new clip because you don't want a 30 gig clip, I guess. So there we go. That's all our video, I think.
The flood is unpredictable and frightening, so it makes sense for...
yeah, sounds like he's wrapping it up there. Now, we want our good audio that we recorded separately to come into play here rather than this camera audio. So here's our audio file that we recorded on our recorder. Oh, much better. Very nice. So we will scan through it. I'm scanning through using keyboard shortcuts, the J, K, and L key. The L starts the playhead playing. The K stops. The J plays backwards. And if you hit those forward and backward keys more than once, you'll play at double speed.
Take me seriously, I dare you.
So there we are, dragging through very quickly. But anyway, we're going to scan through.
This is Crash Course Mythology,
until
episode
we
16,
hear the click of our slate. So there's Mike's announcement.
Scene 1, take 1.
And there he clicks. So we'll just go back a frame at a time to where that sound starts, and we will drop a marker with the M key, and it is marked. So now, through the magic of snapping, when you want to drag audio down, you have to roll over this little drag audio only tool, and we'll drag that down to the timeline, and the magic of snapping will line those markers up. So they've all dropped in together. And if I drop my markers correctly, we should be synced up now.
This is Crash Course Mythology, episode 16, scene 1, take 1.
Okay, so that looks and sounds pretty good. And I've muted muted that camera audio. I think we're pretty close there. We're having a few playback problems because of the screen recording. But what we can do, instead of looking at this at full resolution, which we're doing now, you can see you can select your playback resolution. Let's move that down to a half so we don't use the resources quite so heavily on the computer. Don't want to tax the MacBook here. Let's
Gilgamesh, Shurupak.
Let's try an eighth, and this will be very blurry, but we'll be able to see if...
about living in the city of Shurupak on the banks of the Euphrates. He explains that a group of gods, Anu, Eli...
Not going to play back. Great. So I'm pretty sure we got it close. So at this point, we need to get rid of this track of camera audio. The easiest way to do that is to use the track select forward tool, which you can click up here on your toolbar, or you can hit the A key to switch to it. Wherever you click on the timeline, this tool selects everything ahead of it. So now we've selected all the clips, but we just want those audio clips selected. So if you hold down Shift, it goes to a single arrow, and you can select everything on that track from there forward. And we just hit the backspace key, and it is gone.
Leo, Ninurta, Inugi, and Ea put their divine heads together.
Okay, that looks great. So now we have a bunch of clips and one giant audio clip. That is not quite going to cut it. It's not going to be able to edit it. So we need to turn these into individual clips that will behave as a video clip. So the next tool we're going to use is the razor tool. And we're going to cut up this audio to match these video clips so that we can then put them together. The razor tool, very easy to use. Snapping is your friend here, where the program can make a pretty good guess about where you want to cut this thing. As you drag your mouse over, it will snap to that edit point in the video, and then we can just click, and it cuts the audio into two pieces. We've got one that is the same size as that video. We'll go back to the razor tool and cut the rest of these up. And that little one on the end probably doesn't have any content, but let's be thorough. We'll also make it into a clip. So now we've got every one of them divided up. Okay, so at this point, we need to think back to the color correction we did. We want to make sure this looks as good as it looked when we had it all fixed up earlier. So we're going to go back to our effects and look in our presets, and there is the Myth 16 color we made. So what I'm going to do is select all of the videos here. So what I'm going to do is select all of these video clips, drag in our color preset, and great. Beautiful, beautiful, beautiful. It's all fixed up. Okay, so at this point, we want to make these into clips, and the best way to do that is with the Merge Clips tool. So we'll select this audio and video. We want to unite these as if they just came out of the camera, so the program can't tell the difference between them and what the original clips were like. So we've selected the two that we want to put together. We go to the Clip menu, and select Merge Clips. And there we have the Merge Clips menu. We're not going to mess around with any of that stuff. We're just going to change the name to Clip 1. So there it is. We've made a clip. It behaves as a clip from the camera does, and we can edit it in the source monitor and move it over to the program like so. So the rest of them, we're going to go ahead and do those too. You can also, instead of going up to the clip menu, you can just right-click after you've selected both the audio and video that you want and merge clips. There we go. That's clip 2. Through the magic of editing, we've now made all our clips. We've still got our footage folder here. Everything, all the original stuff is untouched. We are just going to work with these from here on out. Now things are starting to get a little crowded over here, especially on the small screen, but we're going to add a few bins or folders that we'll use in the editing process. At some point we will have animation, so we'll make a folder for that to go in when it arrives, and we will also have b-roll or images and graphics that we will add to the video. We're also going to need a bin for our sequences because we will be duplicating them, and there ends up being a lot of them because we want to iterate our work as we go, just in case we need to go back and change something. And it's easy, so why not do it? And for the moment, we're going to also need our assets, which we talked about earlier. Those are here in our drive. We're going to import that whole folder, and it's going to make me flatten some Photoshop layers here for some of the stuff that we use regularly as recurring stuff. Yep, there's a few things that won't import. What are they? Nothing we need. Great. Those are more of those audio files or audio support files that we won't use. We just need the waves. Okay, the last thing we're going to do is set up the sequence that we will be editing this video in. We can go to File, New Sequence, and you get your new sequence window. There are a lot of settings you can adjust in here. Premiere has pre-made sequence settings for a lot of very popular cameras and formats, which is really handy. Just about anything you shoot, you can find a sequence that will fit those settings, which is a massive improvement over the old days. But we are going to use digital SLR 1080p 24 because even though we shot this in 4K, we are going to eventually export it in 1080, and we're going to use all that extra 4K real estate to move the shots around. So let's start with a 1080p sequence, and let's name it in a way that is consistent with the rest of the project. And it's funny that we picked this episode because this is a huge name. Usually they don't have a name this long, but that's fine. So there is the sequence where it's all going to happen. Ancient Floods in the Near East, and actually you can click on the name and change it. Let's call this V1 because it is the first version. And now it's time to start editing. Okay, so we've got our project set up, we've got our footage color corrected, and we are ready to begin the edit. We've got all our footage here, ready to go. We've got our timeline ready to receive the footage, but how do we get it there? The source window is where most of the edit happens. When you double click on a clip, it moves into the source window. So this is where it all goes down. There's our footage. If you'll remember, we marked where it starts. There's the slate. Now I know, because I've already looked at this, that we've got a few false starts here. It takes a while for us to get started. And our first...
Already, let's get started.
Our first good take happens about here. Okay, so how I do this is I use those keyboard commands JKL to control the transport. You can use the play button here to start and stop the video, or the spacebar will start and stop the video. But I use JKL because I find it easier to control that way. The first thing we want to do, we've got all these takes in this huge clip. We need to select one of them, and we do those with the in and out markers. So you find the beginning of the clip, which that seems to be. So we'll go back one frame at a time to where he starts talking, and we want to set the in marker. And you can do that by clicking there. You can also hit the I key, which is conveniently right above the JK and L. And very easy to use the keyboard shortcuts for that. So now we start playing the clip and listen to Mike perform.
On how various gods created them.
And
it's time to look at one way they destroy it. Today's topic.
He's quite a performer.
Flights.
Long takes.
Tote put his swim trunks on. All right, we're all ready. Let's get started.
Okay, so we find the end of the take. Mike sinks out of the shot because we're talking about floods and drowning. Great. So let's go to before I start talking because we don't need that in there. Now we want to set the out point. Once again, you can do it with this key, or in the parentheses, it tells you the keyboard shortcut there. We'll just press O and we've set the out. So we've now got our first clip. It starts there at the beginning. We'll go to the in or go to the out. We can see each end of the clip with those buttons there, or we can set keyboard shortcuts for that, which I have. Okay, so we'll look at the clip here, make sure it fits what we want, and great. That beginning is good, and we can trim it down at the bottom if we need to. So at this point, we now want this single clip that we've selected, which is 18 seconds long, moved down to the timeline. There are a couple of ways to accomplish this. We are going to do an overwrite, but because there's nothing on the timeline, we're not actually overwriting anything. And our target, you can see our target tracks are set to be V1 and A1. So we'll prioritize putting our clips on those tracks. So what I usually do is overwrite, which we can do by pushing this button or pushing the period key, and that just moves the video down into the timeline. We can undo that. You can also drag it onto the timeline. And here's an interesting warning. This is telling us the clip doesn't match the sequence's settings, which I agree, it does not. We are putting a 4K video clip into a 1080 sequence, so it's going to be way too big. But that is what we want. So we are going to keep those existing settings, and we have this terribly framed shot. But that is what we want. We will fix that momentarily. I will show you exactly how we handle all of that in a second. We check our clip. We've now got a video. We could export this, but it wouldn't make much sense. So the other tool we looked up but didn't use is insert, and we can use this button to insert a clip. We'll insert the same clip just to kind of show you what it does. It will, wherever you have the playhead down here in the project, it will insert that clip. It will cut it in half for you, put the new clip in, and now we've got this clip inside of itself, sort of like Inception, but we don't want it, so we're going to undo it. But if you're ever editing something into the middle of something else, that tool is very, very handy. But for the most part, we will build our timeline from left to right, and we'll be using overwrite today. Next thing we're going to look at is stacking. One of the great innovations of nonlinear editing are the layers. You can have multiple videos in here running on top of each other, blocking each other out, etc. And we'll get more into that later. But for the moment, we are going to add our introduction made by our Animators Thought Cafe in here. So, oh, so cute. Mike dives out of the frame, and we want the intro to start right there. So we have our beautifully made intro. Let's double click on that. It's in the source monitor now, and we can drag it down and add it right at the playhead because that's where we want it to come in. And again, snapping is your friend. It will be attracted to both the end of the clip if you're near there or to the playhead to try to help you line it up. It's very intuitive and wonderful. So let's take a look at how that looks. Very nice. Okay, now you'll note there's no sound with that intro because the music is down here. We'll set the endpoint right where the music starts. And, whoa, it's way loud, but we'll fix that in a minute by changing the volume. So we'll drag this audio down. And let's put it on track 3. And again, it helps. Snapping is your friend. It has automatically tried to align it with the head of this clip, which will put them in sync together. Now, this is way too loud. You can see we're clipping over here on the audio. So what we want to do is turn the volume down on this audio, which you can do by selecting that audio clip, going into Effect Controls, and we've got our level slider here. You can drag that down, let's say about, oh boy, that's way too quiet. I think -12 should do it. You can drag it down or you can just set it. Oh yeah, much more tolerable. You can also change that on the file itself. This is the way I usually do it. By what I do is just, if you hover over any of these tracks with the mouse pointer and use your scroll wheel, up will make the track larger, down will make the track smaller. This works on all of them, but you can drag that up and then you'll have a line here, which is the volume control. You can slide it up and down, but -12 was about right. But that's close enough for now. We will fix all that later in the audio mix. So now we've got Mike's funny joke at the end, and he's out, and we're in the intro. I love it. Very quickly before we move on, let's talk about this whole framing situation we've got going on. So that you can't put that on the internet, right? That's not going to fly. So what we want to do is change this and make it look like a purposeful shot. So we select, make sure the playhead is over the is on top of the clip we want to work on, and that we're seeing it in the program monitor. Then we'll select that clip and go up here to the source window and click on Effect Controls. And that lets us look at all the effects that are applied to the clip, which are none, but it also shows us the motion controls, which are what we're going to use to change the size and positioning of this clip. So let's take this down to about 70% and see what it looks like. We're just going to try to turn this into a nice wide shot with Mike in the center. So that's a little more reasonable size-wise. We can see his face and everything, but the top of his head is cut off. He doesn't have any headroom, so I'm going to use the anchor point to move the video's anchor point up a little so that the center is right about there. That looks pretty good to me. And it's smart to scrub through the clip because Mike tends to move around a little bit. This looks good. Give him a little bit of headroom. You know, I'm not a great fan of the rule of thirds. I like him to be pretty close to the top of the frame.
All right, we're all ready. Let's get started.
And how does that look? Let's see. We're gonna. Oh boy, yeah, this is really dragging with the screen recording happening, so that's not ideal. Let's take a look.
We're all ready. Let's get started.
Great. Great, great. Okay, so now we're out of our intro and we are ready to go back to some of our regular video. Let's close our assets window just to keep things looking nice here. Get back into clip 1 by double clicking it, and it's back in the source monitor. And there we are. We have our old clip marked. I'm going to go to the end of that clip and we will start to scrub forward. I'm going to scrub at double speed here until we find an endpoint. And what I'm doing is continuously, I'm mostly listening to the audio, and I'm continuously tapping the I key to set a new endpoint so I can catch when he starts talking. Okay. Yes. Those water wings were hilarious. That seems to me like he's about to come back in when he says good. That's a good indicator. Okay, so now we're back into another take. I've hit that I key, set my endpoint, and we're just riding along with it. And often I scrub through these at double speed because I've heard them before and I know what a good take sounds like. But you should pay close attention and listen and make sure you've got the best take. Yep, and this is a bad take. So we're gonna keep going in search of the good take. And this is unusual with this talent. He's really excellent. Yep. Oh boy, must be a slow start this morning. Yeah, we got a lot of fooling around on set here, so we're going to move on to clip 2. I believe it will be in there. So we just start writing that I key, keep trucking.
Probably familiar with the story
And there
of
we've
flood
started a
from the
take.
Bible, featuring Noah and the ark, but it turns out that a lot of cultures have flood myths. One explanation for this is the belief that myths are rooted in history. Remember euhemerism? Plus, many of the earliest complex societies grew around rivers, which would flood.
Okay, now that sounds like a full take. Yep, so we've got a good take of that clip. Once again, we've marked the in and the out, but because I was watching along and tapping the I key, that in point is probably late. Let's take a look at it.
Probably familiar.
Yeah, we missed that first word. So I go back to the in point, and then one frame at a time, back up, set the new in point. There, that's a good one. Great. That sounds great. So now we're going to use something called a J-cut, because it's sort of shaped like a J. We've got, at the end of the intro, we've got this big quiet moment there. So what I want is, while we're still showing that video, I want the audio of Mike talking to start, to sort of give the viewer no time to stop paying attention to the video, because this is going to YouTube and there are a lot of cool cat videos in the suggestions right next to this video. So we don't want them to get bored for even a second. I'm going to overwrite this onto the timeline, and you can see here where these overlap. So whatever's on top is going to take precedence, and we won't see the video underneath, but we can hear the audio. So I'm zooming in and out of the timeline using the plus key to zoom in, minus key to zoom out, so I can sometimes get a closer look at how this cut's going. And so let's take a listen to this.
You're probably familiar with the story of the flood from the...
Great. So as you can see, we've once again got the issue of the framing, but luckily, with our old shot, we set up this nice framing that we like so much already. So one thing I forgot to do then is make a preset for it, like we did with the color earlier. So we've got the playhead over the clip that we're thinking of. We've got that clip selected, so it's turned white there, it's highlighted. And we will go over to the effect controls again and right-click on motion and save the preset. And let's call that CC Myth 16, the wide shot. The benefit here is that we don't have to do all those motion controls every time. We just go to our presets. We can even, since we're naming these all with the same CC Myth name, we can even just search CC Myth. And since we're naming all these with the same CC Myth name, here in the effects panel, we can use the search bar to search for CC Myth, and there's our color, there's our wide shot. At this point, we just drag this wide shot onto our clip, and we're good. Beautiful. Looks great. All right, so now we're on to the next clip. Let's go back to the source monitor up here. You've got these different tabs. From our effect controls, we'll go to the source monitor, and we will pick out our next clip. So you go to the end of that in out, and when you set a new in beyond the in and out, it just starts over. Okay, so there's the beginning of a take, and we'll zip through it here. And
despite his frightening teeth, he also has a reputation for healing or protection in some stories.
And that sounds like the end of a take to me. And it was. Great. So we go back to the head. And we missed it slightly, so we back up one frame at a time until we find the beginning of that word. We've set that clip. Let's go back to the beginning of it one more time. And when you are on the frame that is the in marker, this little symbol will show up here. So you can always have a visual confirmation that you're at the end point.
Most of the time, that flooding was neither predictable nor helpful, except for the Nile River, whose floods were regular, provided water for irrigation.
Okay, that seems good to me. So Now, this is another sort of a J-cut. We're going to use the layers again to try to retain the audience's attention. What we do here at Crash Course is try to make the video seem sort of superhumanly fast, and I feel like his head's touching the top of the frame there, which is distracting me, so we will bring it down just a little bit there in the effects. So one of the things we do is cut these in what I thought was kind of a funny way when I started here, but so usually in my past life of editing, I would take this clip that I've just marked out here and drag it and put it on the same layer with that one, and it would play like so. Mike finishes saying flood, and then the next word starts. But what we do here, because there's a lot of jump cuts, we're using the same shot, so we just jump back and forth between Mike's face. We want it to look a little different, and we also want there to be some continuity in sound to carry the viewer through that what could be a jarring jump cut. So instead of putting it on the timeline there, we are going to put it on another layer, and we are going to slightly overlap the video by a few frames. And the end of Mike saying flood will play at the same time as him starting the next line. So what I try to do is just play the video and listen, and I will stop right on the D sound. Right, so you can see there's still some of the video left, the fade out in the room sound of him saying flood. But we can't give the viewer a break, or they will look away and look at a cat video, so I will drag down this other clip we've marked out and put it on video layer 2, audio layer 2. So now these are overlapping. So it's really quick, and it's a little jarring going to that framing especially, but it sounds pretty good. Great, and there's not a moment for the viewer to get distracted for a second. They're just getting sort of a wall of information, which is how we want this to be presented. We want these to be so information dense, and we will add more information as we go, but this is one subtle editing trick that helps us keep the viewer's attention. Again, we've got the framing problem, so I'm going to start by dragging that wide shot preset over here, and we are going to make our other two main shots we're going to use. One where Mike is on the left side of the frame, and one where he's on the right. So let's come in a little closer, 77%, so we can really get it, look him in the eyes here. And we will adjust his headroom appropriately by using the anchor point vertically moving. And then we will move the anchor point horizontally to place Mike on the left side of the frame. We get a nice look at our statue here. Let's give him room to wave his arms, and you can see his head's touching the top of the frame there, which I don't like, so we'll bring that down a little. And he's getting a little too far to the left there sometimes, so we'll bring him back a little this way. And we'll also keep the edge of the column from showing over here. So that looks pretty good to me. And what we will do is go again, right-click on Motion, and save a new preset, which we call CC Myth Left. There he's framed. So we will now continue as such and fill out the rest of the video, and through the magic of editing we will jump straight to our rough cut being done. Okay, great. Well, we are going to skip forward to a future time where the basic edit is together for the most part. We've alternated our clips up and down and overlapped them so that we've got our seamless edit. I've made a marker here for the section that is called the thought bubble, which is our long animated section, and that shows where it runs and about how long it runs. So what we want to do right now is flatten everything down so it's all on one track, and that is pretty easily accomplished by just pulling all our stuff that's on layer 2 down to layer 1, and then we have one continuous video track where our jump cuts are included. But I'll back that up because we can do all that at once with, you'll remember, the track select forward tool, which we select by pressing A, then we hold down Shift and select everything on that second track, and then we can move it all together. We press V to go back to the selection tool up here, and just drag it down. Oh, whoops. Let's zoom in a little further so that snapping can be our friend. And we just reselect it. Drag everything down, and it should keep it all in the same place. And then we've just got one continuous track. We'll move our intro down. Now, what we're going to do is add our animations. And I find that the easiest way to make a bunch of animations for a video is to hire someone else to do it. Our super talented animators at Thought Cafe in Canada come up with a beautiful layer of animations to put on top of this video. So we'll double click inside that animation folder, and it looks like we've got an animation folder in our project here, and they've sent us three things. Our CC Myth Alpha, our SFX Stim, sound effects, and a patch. We'll look at all three of these. Let's import them in and see what we've got. And I will show you how we add the alpha. So alpha refers to an alpha channel, which means anything that is not part of the video or anything in black here is transparent, basically. So it has transparency. As we scrub through these, we'll see there are some full screen animations, but there's some that just cover part of the screen. So everything that's in black here will be transparent, which means we'll be able to continue to see Mike underneath, which is pretty cool. So let's go back to the beginning of the video, and then we'll find a pretty high up layer here, since it has to go over everything else. Let's put it on layer number 6. We'll drag it down, make sure it's bumped up against the start of the video, and then because they had our rough cut, everything should align. Okay, so we've got our alpha laid in. Let's scrub forward to one of the animations and see how it looks.
Put his swim trunks on. All right, we're all ready. Let's get started.
Okay, great, beautiful, awesome. So everything looks great there. And apparently at some point in the process, the animators must have noticed something that needed a fix. So they sent me this patch file. Let's take a look at how that works. In the folder that they sent us, there was also a patch, which means they fixed something after they sent me this file. So we'll take a look at the patch. Yep. And the upside of these patches, one of the nice things they do is have it start at the time code where it needs to be dropped into my timeline. So you can see it's 9 minutes, 3 seconds, and 15 frames here. If I go down to my timeline window and click on the time code, I can type in 00090315, and it jumps the playhead right to where we need to be. We can then grab this video. Let's get in a little closer so we can see what we're doing. Not in that window, in this window. So we grab this video, and snapping once again is your friend, and it drops right in there. So
transmission in the region. And we also learned
we've then got a seamless fix.
A good way to survive a flood is to be reasonably righteous.
Great. Perfect. Thank you, Thought Cafe, for catching that. So one other thing we can do is add more audio sources. One of the things the animators have sent is a sound effects stim that runs concurrent with the thought bubble, which is one of the reasons I've marked the thought bubble out. So let's go find the first frame of the thought bubble,
with one of our
which is this cool animation that they do. It's about a minute and a half of
at the beginning of this
full
story, the hero
frame animation, which the audience really loves. So we find the first frame here by, there's a transition that leads into it that looks like these shutters. We find the first frame of that, and that is where the audio is supposed to kick in that we have up here in our source monitor now. So we'll then find the first frame with sound in it. And I just go through one frame at a time until I hear it. We'll then set an in point there, and we can drag that in here. So we've now got a fully animated section, which is really cool. Let's see what it sounds like.
Sources, the Epic of Gilgamesh. Thought bubble, what you got? At the beginning of this particular story, the hero Utnapishtim.
Great, that looks really good. Sounds really good. We will balance that out later when we mix the audio. Okay, so the next step is to add some images to the videos, because we've got images that are full screen like so. We've got some stuff that covers part of the screen like we have here at the beginning, but then we've also got a lot of areas where we've just got Mike's face going. So what we often do is add a bunch of images, B-roll we call it, images, video, paintings, all kinds of things to cover some of these sections where it's just Mike talking. So I've already done all the research here and gotten all the stuff we need, and we can talk about how these work. So, for example, I know that in this section, Mike is talking about common flood myths that are out in the world. So I've got this picture of Noah being inspired to build the ark, and let's zoom in here so we can see. We'll bring that in so that it transitions in, well, it appears after the animations are on.
In some of the myths we've examined, the idea that creation's
great. So we've got
some of the myths we've examined,
and we want it to come out before the new animation starts. So it needs to come out there. So we've got Noah, and now we've got a static shot there. We're not going to get into After Effects here, but we can give this a little bit of dynamic look here just by moving it a little bit. Let's say we set a keyframe to scale and make it 5% bigger, and then drag that keyframe out to the end so that the motion happens across the whole time that
Anyway, flood myths may also reflect a common theme.
Oh yeah, that looks great.
The myths we've examined.
It just helps it look like a video, even though it's a still, gives it a little motion. Because, come on, what's a video if not moving pictures? We've got several tools that we use on these B-rolls. One of the things is this vignette that I made in Photoshop. It's just, we talked about vignettes a little bit in color correction. It's just a alpha file with transparency that puts a little vignetting on there and just helps focus your attention on whatever's happening in the center of the screen and makes it look nice, I think. So we've got our picture in here, and you can see, if you watch this transition between the full screen, it just feels a little clunky, a little bit like a hard cut to Noah there from Mike's face. Okay, so here in my assets, the animators have made us transitions. I like number 3, and it is basically just like that transition you saw earlier in the animations, just a shutter closing and opening, and there's alpha so we can see what is going on underneath. But at the time that this is fully closed, we just see this, ideally. And what I like to do is take you remember we used markers earlier. We can either click here and add a marker, or we can hit the M key. So there we have it. We now have a marker in the center when it's closed, which you'll see why I'm doing that in just a moment. I want to then drag this transition into our timeline, and that marker should snap right to the edge. So now the frame where it changes from Noah to Mike is the closed frame. So we know it will be covering what we need to cover. But we've got a problem here. I'm going to predict a problem. And that is that this transition is sitting under our animation alpha. And that means the animation alpha is going to be the dominant visual thing, and this animation that we're seeing here is going to overlap with the transition. And so the problem is it is on top of the transition. We easily solve this by pulling the transition up above the alpha layer, and then our shutters will beautifully close over it, close out that scene, and open back up on Noah. There he is. And let's go ahead and transition out. Again, we're going to want to put it on top of our alpha so that it is the dominant source. Great. And that is how we add B-roll. So eventually we'll add B-roll. We will continue to add sounds, and at the end of the process, we end up with a timeline that looks kind of like this. There's all kinds of beautiful B-roll. There's all kinds of animations. There's full screen stuff. There's some After Effects stuff that I do that is much simpler than what you'll see from the animators. But yeah, it ends up looking really cool and really thick and really dynamic, and hopefully lots of people will watch it. Hi, Stan Muller, Senior Producer at Crash Course, here with you once more to wrap up editing Floods in the Ancient Near East. We've put our project together, we've laid in the animations, we've laid in all the B-roll, it's got all its beautifully mixed audio, this thing's great, it's perfect, we've watched it a bunch of times now, and we love it. But now it's time to put our baby out into the world and let other people watch it, which means we need to export the project. So, easy enough. We select our latest version here, make sure that's highlighted in the timeline. We're going to click on File, we're going to click Export and Media. And this will bring up, offline material, I know, but we're not going to track it down. This will bring up the export settings window, in which we, straightforwardly enough, choose the export settings. In this first drop-down, you can see all the different formats that are available. There are many. Just about anything your client wants you to deliver, you can export from here. We use H.264 to go to YouTube because that's what YouTube recommends. You can pick a preset to kind of get a place to start, or we upload to YouTube, so we use something very close to this YouTube 1080p HD preset that comes standard with Premiere. We changed it a little bit and have one called Crash Course Final Upload, but let's just start with this 1080p. No comments needed. The next thing you want to do is set the location where it's going to go. So you find the location where you want to put it by clicking on the output name. We will put it in our export folder. Save it. You go ahead and save it wherever you feel like it needs to go for you to find it later. Export video, export audio. It's important those are checked if you want both. Okay, so down here we've got this confusing summary of all of the settings we have so far, and then a number of tabs here for different settings. Here are your basic video settings. The only thing I ever really change in here, occasionally down here in the bitrate settings, I'll bump up the bit rates a little bit, but I believe this YouTube preset gets pretty close to the recommended settings for YouTube. So there's not a whole lot for me to mess with here. There's a VR video checkbox in there if you're making a VR video, but we are not, as you may or may not have noticed. You can make some changes to the audio. Again, I usually just leave this alone. Multiplexer, no. Captions, also leave this alone. At least I do when I'm making these videos. The publish tab is kind of interesting. So you can have Media Encoder automatically upload the video to different places like Adobe's Creative Cloud folder, the Adobe Stock, Behance, Facebook, FTP, we're a YouTube show. So there's Twitter, Vimeo. As a YouTube show, we occasionally use this YouTube sometimes. It's very handy if you just want to have the thing uploaded automatically. You can write a description, etc., add it to a playlist, set its privacy. It's really handy. So that's cool. But most of the time, we just leave all that alone. These boxes at the bottom, use maximum render quality, etc. we do not generally mess with. It's kind of neat. You can set the start time code. You're putting out something with transparency, you can render alpha channel only. Lots of options. And there are even more options in the Media Encoder external software, which we're going to look at now. So at this point, I want to make sure I've selected either sequence into out or entire sequence so that the whole video gets exported. I prefer entire sequence just in case there's an in and out set somewhere that I don't know about. And then instead of hitting export here, I will usually hit Q. That's because when we export a couple different versions, one with different graphics, etc., a clean version and a final version, one for our archive. So the Media Encoder, it's going to take a minute to create these queued items, but the Media Encoder opens a second piece of software to actually do the encoding. And that's handy because you can set up a queue, multiple. It's handy because you can set up a queue and have multiple files exporting at once. You can also, importantly, if you have a fast enough computer, you can start this export by pushing the play button and continue working in Premiere. Open a different project, continue editing, and that can be convenient if you're in a rush, crunched for time. But usually, I just line up all my exports for the day and start them at the end of the day or during my lunch break so that things export while I'm not working anyway, so that the export can have access to all the resources. Anyway, that is about it with Media Exporter. So you will push play here, the export will start, and once that blue bar is filled all the way up, you've got a video. Head over to where you created your export folder and upload it where it needs to go. And that is it.